Well, hello, strangers. Don't touch that dial. You've tuned in to Neon Static, where once a week, one true scary story is told, one you won't hear anywhere else. I'm your host, Viola, and today I take you back to childhood, where everything seems bigger and stronger than you, and you aren't sure what will happen, but you have that creeping gut instinct that it will be bad, it will hurt, and you will be powerless to stop it. But it's not just bad things that can go unexplained. And in today's story, you might see both in action. This is story 1, 2, 3. Go. When I was young, my parents would take my older sister and I to my grandparents' place for a month or so each summer. It was what you'd call an aging neighborhood. We were the only kids on the street. All the houses were outright owned. All the neighbors had been in place for years. My sister said it was a bit like that movie, the one about the kids getting sucked into a Leave It to Beaver-esque show. It had that oddly muted pastel color scheme and a fixed cast of neighbors circulating around the neighborhood. As the only two under 40, we fell under intense scrutiny. Even drawing flowers on the sidewalk in chalk was like sending up a signal flare for people to exit their homes and casually meander our way to peek over our shoulders, policing that what we drew was nice, decent, or suitable for young ladies. In response, my older sister drew a chalk outline and added a nice splotch of red in the area where, well, most men would clench their legs to see it. And then she waited. When the first art critics showed up, she turned, beaming her wide, wicked smile, and waited. She's always been the first one to stand on business. It's something I've admired a great deal more than my grandparents, to whom my sister's artistic delinquency was quickly reported. They didn't scold her too much, but they did insist we find a new game, preferably in the backyard, where no one could see what we were up to. That's when my sister and I took to playing house, and happily, our grandparents had just the perfect playhouse for us. A small trailer, about the size of an Airstream, one that you'd have to hitch to a pickup truck to get anywhere. Nowadays, fifth wheels are downright glamorous, but ours was a dollhouse version of a hovel with particle board counters and a barely larger than full-sized mattress with the comfort level of folded cardboard. To a 7- and 5-year-old, though, it was our own us-sized version of a Barbie dream house. We'd take our lunches in there, pretending to cook them on the stove, playing out the cycles of the day. Or we'd play act out a princess locked in a tower game, with the trailer taking on the very important role of jail cell. On rainy summer days, of which there were many, this was Southern Oregon, we'd relax at the tiny kitchenette table, drawing with the speckled lighting and tapping of raindrops on the roof, a camp lantern our light for ambiance. And when those games failed, we'd add the usuals: freeze tag, hide and seek. Though we quickly realized the trailer wasn't great for either, being the most obvious place to hide. All in all, it was a normal childhood in the early 90s, which is why what happened on a random Tuesday in August stands out. It had been sunny for the whole week prior, but the air seemed to swell more and more each day, with water like a water balloon fastened to a hose. The day before, we'd played hide and seek, having little else to do, but the humidity was miserable. Our game soon devolved into the usual things cranky siblings will get into. It started with just being mean to each other, one of us taunting, "Hide better, you make it so easy to find you, it's boring." Not to be outdone, the other defensively snapped, "Like you're any better. I always see you no matter where you hide." "Hurry up and start counting already. Not that you'll win anyway." 1, 2, 3. "I'll find you, I always do." "Only because you cheat. I see you peeking, you little sneak." Nuh-uh, you're the cheat. I'll get you. I always get you. It soon went from snapping at each other to arbitrary rule changes solely in the rule changer's favor, to whining and threats to tell Grandma. My sister finally stormed off in anger, abandoning the round of hide-and-seek and leaving me bawling from her rejection. Both of us were miserable in that swelter. So the following day, known to us now as That Tuesday, even the weather appeared to have had enough. It ripped the balloon open and sent torrential, sleeting downpours of water gushing down. After breakfast, my sister and I ran for the trailer. In that sense of relief around us, we too apologized, if not erasing the bad day before, at least wiping the sting of it away. We had a stash of paper and colored pencils in the stove, logically, and decided to stay there, listening to the rain, feeling the relief of the air no longer tense and bloated, but clean and cleared with every falling sheet of water and apology. We could, once heads down drawing, lose track of time. But that day, we were at it for hours. The dim lighting from the storm outside made it easy to not notice the hours spilling away. It was only at the sound of a thud, something falling over outside the trailer, that my sister looked at her little Casio wristwatch and jumped. She told me with surprise it was already past 4. I was stunned. We'd drawn right through lunch, and yet I didn't feel hungry. I looked to my sister for what we would do next. She opened her mouth, and as though she was speaking both right in front of me and from behind me, I heard her voice. Only it was jumbled, as her voice said 2 separate things, interrupting herself with herself.
We should probably so easy to find
go.
You.
My head whipped back, facing behind me, where the door of the trailer was shut against the wind and rain, and then I looked back to her, my sister. My sister's face was stretched in surprise, her hand, still holding an indigo blue colored pencil, raising slowly to her mouth. I gaped, and then opened my mouth. I was going to ask her, what was that? Only I heard my voice, coming again from somewhere else.
No matter where you hide.
My sister's eyes were narrowing at me, but mouth still open, I shook my head back and forth, then leaned over the kitchenette to stage whisper, I didn't say that. It wasn't me. She shushed me, putting a finger up, leaning towards the window of the trailer. There was a shade drawn against the window, and in occasional flashes of lightning, the side of her face was illuminated in splotches. I clamped my lips shut. I was angry at being told to be quiet when I didn't understand what was happening, but then I heard it too. A shuffle. A shuffling sound. Something brushing up against the side of the trailer. I listened hard, even tilting my head to the window. I sucked in a breath and held it, and just when I was prepared to ask her what had she heard from the window, sounding like it was mere inches away, I heard my sister's voice again.
I see you peeking, you little sneak. You cheat, you cheat, you cheat, you.
My body flinched away from it, mouth flying open in shock, but my vocal cords clenched, all at once terrified at hearing the voice I'd known since literally birth, coming from outside, while I stared directly at the person whose voice it was. Her mouth was clamped shut in a tight, white little line. Her eyes were huge and glassy. My sister stared back at me, but she raised her finger to her mouth and shook her head, ensuring I continued to keep my mouth shut. I nodded back quickly and watched as she slid slowly from the bench seat of the kitchenette, coming to a crouch on the floor. With much less smoothness and grace, I slid along the bench seat opposite hers. I wanted to rip myself away from that window, that weirdly robotic repetition of my sister's voice. And, as I thought about it, her words. I looked at her, even as my own voice now emanated from the window.
I'll get you. I always get you. I always see you, no matter where you hide.
Forget going slowly. I flung myself free of the bench, landing hard on my knees. The carpet was threadbare and miserably thin, but the padding underneath it did manage to baffle the sound of my knees thudding to a dull thunk. My sister winced at the sound. My eyes filled with tears the way they always did when I did something wrong and knew I'd be in trouble for it. Only instead of my father's growling voice, the pain of the stick coming down on me, I now dialed into a deeper fear. The innocent little voice of my own imagination wondering what was roaming around outside the trailer. How did it have both my voice and the voice of my sister? And what might it do if it caught us? What was that? How? Why? And with a cold like rainwater drying in air conditioning, I whispered the question, "What do we do?" And from 2 inches away, from the door, the opposite side of the trailer, despite it being at the window's side moments before, came my sister's voice again. And I recognized the words this time again. It was the words I'd heard yesterday, taunting, angry when she'd said them, but now they were repeated robotically, like someone reading off a cue card.
It's boring. It's boring. Start counting. Boring. I see you. Boring.
My hands clapped to my mouth, mirroring my sister. We locked eyes. She looked so blurry through the running tears pouring like the rain outside had. I watched her eyes cut left, swinging to the door. Then lightning quick, she snapped out a hand and toggled the little locking mechanism down. 1 second later, and I could see the door being pulled. That tiny bit of give it had as someone outside pulled at it, tried to open it, tried to come inside. It was in my voice again, now calmly reciting my counting, but sounding absolutely insane.
1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 3, 3. I'll get you. 3, 2, 1.
A crash, lightning and thunder. The sky opened, and the tapping, insistent fingers of rain now turned hard, clicking, clacking, hammering against the window. It sounded like when my parents would drive down a gravel road, kicking up rocks. But I was too stunned, too stupidly shocked to understand what it was. I sucked in a breath. My hands remained over my mouth. They smelled like the bacon from breakfast still, and that made me gag. But my lungs were already hitching from not allowing my cries out. Without thinking, I kick-pushed my feet against the floor, pushing myself backwards to under the kitchenette table. My sister sprang after me, coming alongside, clutching me into a hug, then lowered her face to my ear to whisper, "Hail! It's hail! And it's coming down like a ton of bricks. Maybe just stay quiet. It's okay. It won't get us." We stared out at the door. It pulled again, and then was let go. A flash of lightning cut through the trailer, illuminating through the window now above us where we crouched under the table. And for a brief flash, we saw a silhouette. A horrible shadow. A head and shoulders. But where the head should have been were long, reaching antlers. Only not antlers. They were thick and twisted. They looked like broken arms protruding from what should have been the head's ears. It was a literal second between the door being pulled and the shadow illuminated on the window side, and with a cramp of fear that threatened to force another cry out of my mouth, I realized just how it was moving so fast. It wasn't. There were 2 of them. As though to prove my thought, the door began to flex out again as whatever was on the other side, wearing my sister's voice, began pulling. Behind us, the sounds of pelting hail were joined with a thudding as the thing whose shadow we'd seen began hitting the window. And between this twin onslaught, my sister and I clung to each other, faces wet with each other's tears. My sister's voice whispering in my ears over and over, "It's okay. It's okay. It'll be okay. I won't let them get you." I'd never known my sister to lie, but in that moment, the voice inside my head, my own voice, told me, "But who will protect her?" The next 2 seconds spun out like hours. All at once, the air smelled odd, metallic, and ozone-y. I felt the tickle of my sister's hair brushing against me, then the tickle of the light hair on my arms standing up. And at once, the world was a brilliant, white light. There was no shadow this time. Everything was blotted out, including sound, besides an insanely loud bang that rumbled through us, making me feel like my very insides were rattled. The door immediately flexed back in, and from behind us, we heard a low, guttural cry. Fear, anger, pain. My sister pulled me even closer, mashing my face into her shirt, her heart pounding hard against my cheek as I slammed my eyes shut and began to bawl directly into her shirt. This time, though, she didn't shush me. She just held me until, a few moments later, I'd calmed into that hiccupy post-cry. And then she was pulling me out from under the table, to my feet, telling me we needed to go. We needed to run, now, back to the house. But I was terrified. My vision was still filled with that horrible shadow, the man with the arms stuck to his head. But she was so determined, and so sure, that I scrambled out after her, her hand tight on mine as she clicked at the lock, then pushed the door open, exploding out of it, and ripping me along behind her. And we ran. Our kids slid in the wet grass, but between us both we sprinted to the house, her crying out between breaths, "Don't look back, don't look back, just run, come on, I've got you, just run!" And she did have me. She had me all the way to the back door, where she swung it open and fell us both inside, collapsing in a muddy, rain-soaked heap. Our knees were skinned, our noses snotty and clotted, our eyes red-rimmed from the constant salt of our tears. But with the back door slammed shut behind us, I couldn't have cared less. We got cleaned up in the bathroom. My sister had never done laundry before, but I stood next to her in just my underpants, watching her carefully read each bottle, adding this and that to the monstrous Maytag that now swished and clacked, erasing the afternoon's grime from our clothes. New clothes on, we snuck into the rumpus room, selecting one of the movies our grandparents had recorded off their ancient VCR. It was some dire movie about a kid being separated from her parents and family. Natty Gann, I think. Grandma was infamous for finding the most off-putting children's movies that there were, and putting them on for us to immediately fall asleep to. They were movies that made me feel weird, scared even, a feeling I couldn't describe until I learned the word foreboding in school. Yet, on that day, in contrast to the terror we'd had outside, it was first my sister, and then I, who fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. After my grandparents both passed, we returned with our parents to help clean, resolve the final paperwork, and of course, explore for what would be the last time, a place so central to our childhood. I can't say I remember my sister or I ever approaching the trailer again, not after what had happened there. But that day, that final day, without speaking or agreeing to it, we both made a beeline for the trailer. We walked to the outside. The paint peeled in several places, weirdly patterned from the lightning strike. Because that's what that was, that light and terrible thunder. But the metal husk showed nothing else. Certainly no weird claw marks, no divots. Inside, the paper drawings we'd abandoned were still in place, the paper now watermarked in the ambient humidity. The oven held one desiccated granola bar that crumbled to dust in my sister's hands. And that was all. Nothing to explain what had happened. No proof to point to beyond a memory. One of the few that I have from childhood. In spite of no evidence, though, I know, as does my sister, that one day, as we hid in the trailer, something, two somethings, came to play hide and seek with us. to get us. And they spoke using our voices, our exact words, repeating them like a lure, bidding us into the dark. And my sister and I both know that it only stopped when light from above banished them away. That was story 123. What do you think they were? I of course have my own thoughts, but let me know yours. Email and social are in the description, or the standard like, comment, and subscribe works too. Whichever you like. I'm just happy you tuned in today, and I look forward to seeing you next week, when we can do it all over again. And until that next time, thanks for listening, and take care, strangers.